Alright, YouTube, Ghostbusters has predictably become a box office flop. They're at a little bit under 90 million in total sales domestically. They spent 144 million just on making the movie, plus a $100 million ad campaign. Now, what's telling, this is a major ad campaign, and they still end up falling well short of even covering their production costs. Now, they'll cover that proportion with foreign sales or nearly so it'll break even in that respect. But when you consider how much advertising Sony paid for it, they're going to come up, $100 million, maybe $50 million short of their actual goal as far as profit goes. Essentially, the problem with Ghostbusters was manifold. First and foremost, I think perhaps the worst thing was they butchered the Ghostbusters theme song. I was never a fan of the Ghostbusters franchise beyond, yeah, I enjoyed the movie. I watched Ghostbusters, I watched the sequel. They were good movies, they were funny. There was nothing wrong with them. I was never a super fan, though, let's face it. I don't wear a Ghostbusters shirt and go to the theater and, start pounding myself in the head in anticipation of seeing the final rehash of the franchise or anything like that. I was more into the cartoons. But the butchering of the Ghostbusters theme song, that's a classic song. And it was good, and it was catchy, and people love the song even now. They decided, of course, to go, I think it was Fall Out Boy, they decided to butcher the theme song and make it sort of an emo reprisal of the same, which is sad. Probably hurt them more than anything else. The other problem being, of course, none of the original cast is actually there. I explained it would have been wise for Sony to simply take at least one of the original Ghostbusters and write them in, even if it's in a minor role as sort of the aging Ghostbusters mentor. Oh, I broke my hip yesterday. I can't do this anymore. Here's my daughter and my daughter's college roommate. And they're studying, neuroscience or something. And here's their friend, the physicist, and here's this other woman that they met, and they're going to be the new Ghostbusters. Aha! It's solved at last. It would have been a lot better. You could write funny jokes around the very concept of sort of the very old Ghostbuster who can't quite do it anymore, and it would have been fine. And the movie probably would have already pulled in 2 or 3 times as much as it has now. It's being eclipsed by even other movies that are pulling in relatively small totals compared to what their franchises used to, like the new Star Trek or something like that, which I don't know anything about, nor do I claim to care, because I'm also not a Trekkie. I don't know. I think Star Wars is better than Star Trek myself. Some people will massively disagree with me, but I'm not really a fanboy for any franchise. Harry Potter, Lord of the Rings, whatever. Lord of the Rings would be the closest, but that's only because I want to go live in the Shire and smoke some of that fucking good shit that they have over there. Bilbo Baggins has in those weird little barrels, like Merry and Pippin with the Ents there smoking up. Unfortunately, they were killing the smaller, more herby relatives of the Ents, but they were forgiven for this because at least Saruman was gone, I guess. Anyway, not to get off on a tangent, it has been a disaster. The fact is that simply deciding that all critics of the movie are evil, misogynistic sexists, and then constantly browbeating people, oh, you should go see the movie, you don't want to be a fucking bigot, do you? It doesn't work. Which is good, honestly, but the thing is, the franchise is dead. They're not going to have probably another bother. They're not going to bother to release another Ghostbusters. They've learned their lesson, I think, now, and realize that to push their sort of socially conscious, multi-culty, social justice warrior bullshit message is going to cost too much and really has the opposite effect. What it's done is just polarize a group of people that wouldn't have given a fuck if it was an all-female Ghostbusters with at least one original Ghostbuster written in. Now they do give a fuck. They hate Sony. They hate the franchise. A lot of them didn't bother to see it, but you've got to understand, it's like with Star Wars or Lord of the Rings or any of these things. There is a core of people who will go and see any halfway decent sequel that's made a dozen fucking times, and that's where a lot of your revenue is coming from. If you alienate that core of people by suggesting that if they don't like it, if they think that it's talentless because it's talentless, the trailer sucks, the song sucks, everything about it sounds horrible, that they're a bigot or something, that's just going to prevent them from even bothering to go see it one time. They made a huge mistake. They should own up to the fact that the movie was not made properly. They spent a lot of money on effects and very little time doing anything else. And they essentially, it's not even a reboot, it's just a rehash of the first movie with a new cast. Well, there's nothing funny about that. The point was to have sort of the weird dry slash slapstick comedy of Ghostbusters, and they fell far short of that goal. Yeah, so it's been a disaster. Lost what, $100 million. Even after the foreign sales start getting tabulated, they'll have lost perhaps $100 million on making this movie in the first place. What's the fucking point? What's the point of making it? Supposedly profit should be their goal. That's, Hollywood's all about the money and the cocaine. I don't know what they're thinking. But the theme song, I don't really give a fuck because I wasn't going to see it anyway. It wouldn't have mattered if they'd had an all-original cast, honestly. But the theme song, I am upset about that because you can't really improve upon the original. Why didn't they just license the original song again for the new Ghostbusters? Probably would have made an extra $1 million just doing that. They would be at least over the 90 million threshold. Now they've crashed and burned and their domestic sales are way down because a lot of the people who saw the movie thought it was mediocre. It's okay. It's worse. If it had gotten a 1 in 10 rating by all the critics, more people probably would have gone to see it in hopes that it would actually be pretty good and it would become a cult classic or something like that. There's a sort of gap between really, really bad and really, really good that's sort of this nowhere, no man's land. Sort of a minefield of complete and abject failure where a movie isn't bad enough to become notorious enough to have lasting power, and it's not good enough to become notorious enough to have lasting power. It's neither. It's somewhere in the middle. It's the 4 to 6 out of 10 sort of zone where it's just mediocre and nobody gives a fuck. It's, your 0.5 stars out of 5 movie might end up making more long term than something that's like 2 stars out of 5 or something like that. They use different rating systems. All these different sites, they need to have one standard rating system, preferably like out of 100 or out of 10 or something like that. They don't. I don't know why. But it's in that it's literally right smack dab in the middle of mediocrity. It's the worst possible place it could be. It will be forgotten. Nobody will give a fuck. They probably will not bother to make a sequel of their own rehash. And if they did, it'd probably just be Ghostbusters 2 all over again. They're just cannibalizing their own material. That's the worst thing that a film company can do. The worst thing that can be produced is something where it's like the only time that it worked was like Evil Dead 2. Evil Dead 2 is basically a retelling of the first Evil Dead with slightly better effects and maybe a little bit more competent acting at times. Now, I am in the minority here, I admit that, when I say I like the first Evil Dead better. Because I like the over-the-top goriness, the really campy, low-budget feel of it, better than the slightly more fine-tuned rehash Evil Dead 2. I like it more. That being said, I'm in the minority on that one, but I think most people, the majority, prefer the original Ghostbusters to the rehash, which is what Sony has made. But I'm not going to say any more about Ghostbusters. I mean, it's failed. It was predictable that it would fail. It was just a matter of how much it failed. It did a little bit better, I think, than some of the more critical pessimists thought. But that being said, it's still a far cry from being a box office success. It's a far cry from being a critical success outside of the minds of the editors at Jezebel or Salon or something like that. Turning a movie into a political battle obviously did not work for them. They were hoping, I guess, that a bunch of third-wave feminists in solidarity would go see the movie 4 times in the first day. That obviously did not happen. That's about all. Peace out.